Elsewhere in the news, the state of Texas will seek the death penalty for the murder of Breanna Wood.
Westside County 911, what is your emergency?
I have a neighbor over here. He
Where?
speaks Spanish. I don't. The address is 1208 South 12th Ave. He said someone needs an ambulance over there.
On May 2nd, 2009, the morning in Wausau, Wisconsin began as usual, quiet, sunny, promising a warm spring day. People hurried to work, school children gathered for classes. But by noon, everything had changed. In a small apartment on the second floor of a residential building on Stevenson Street, police discovered the body of an 18-year-old girl. Her name was Breanna Schneller. The news spread instantly. For those who knew Breanna, it seemed impossible. Just the day before, she had been texting her friends, discussing plans for the weekend, laughing. A girl full of life, kindness, and energy was suddenly dead. And not just dead, but killed with particular cruelty. When investigators entered the apartment, they were met with a silence steeped in horror. Signs of a struggle, scattered belongings, blood on the walls, everything pointed to the fact that this was not an accident or an unfortunate incident. The girl's body had numerous stab wounds. Experts would later say that the attacker acted in a rage, with some kind of insane determination, as if he wanted to destroy her very life. Breanna was a high school senior preparing for her final exams. She dreamed of becoming a nurse and had already applied to college. She worked part-time, helped her parents, and saved up for a trip with friends in the summer. Her friend recalled, "She was one of those people who always smiled, even when she was tired. Her presence made any place warmer." On the day she was found, everything around seemed to stop. The school where Breanna studied canceled classes. Teachers cried, students couldn't believe what was happening. Candles, flowers, and photographs began to appear at the door of the house where she lived. People went there silently, carrying notes with one question: why? The police acted quickly, but fear had already gripped the city. For the first time in many years, something out of the ordinary had happened in Wausau. People locked their doors and didn't let their children go out alone. The news was full of words like brutal murder and investigation. But for Breanna's family, these weren't just words. They were a reality that was impossible to believe. Her mother later said, "I kept waiting for her to come in, laugh, and say it was all a mistake, but the door never opened." The streets, once filled with the laughter of teenagers, became quiet. The town, accustomed to peace, now lived in anticipation. Who did it? Why? And why her? Breanna's body was found in the morning, but the answers to these questions did not come for weeks. The police said only one thing: the killer was familiar with her. This made the case even more terrifying. If the killer knew her, then he was somewhere nearby. Perhaps he walked the same streets, met the same people, and looked at them with the same gaze. For the residents, it was a shock. For her parents, it was an eternal wound. For the investigators, it was a case they could not forget. It was on that day that the feeling of safety ended in Wausau. Everyone who knew Breanna understood that even the brightest people could become victims simply because someone nearby decided they had power over them. This murder didn't just destroy one life, it changed an entire town. And from that day on, a long search for the truth began, in which every step of the investigation was driven by one desire: to bring justice to a girl whose smile now only lives on in photographs.
My inclination right now is that you might not be the guy.
The day that would be Breanna Schnell's last began quite normally. It was Saturday, May 2nd, 2009. Spring was in full swing. The sun's rays reflected off the windows of houses. The air smelled fresh, and the city was quiet. Breanna woke up around 8 in the morning. She had a short day ahead of her, a few chores around the house, meeting a friend, an evening walk. She felt happy. Summer, graduation, and adult life were ahead of her. In the morning, she talked to her mother on the phone and told her that she was going to clean up and stop by the store. Her mother later recalled that her daughter's voice sounded cheerful and calm. She always spoke quickly, as if she was afraid she wouldn't have time to tell me all the good things that were happening to her, she would say later. Around 10 in the morning, Breanna went shopping. Several neighbors saw her returning home with a bag of groceries, smiling and greeting passersby. No one noticed anything unusual. She entered her apartment, closed the door, and was never seen alive again. Investigators later determined that between 10 a.m. and noon, someone she knew entered the apartment. There were no signs of forced entry. This meant that she opened the door herself. Perhaps she answered the doorbell, or perhaps she simply recognized the voice. Neighbors heard noise around 11 a.m., as if someone was dropping objects and slamming doors. No one paid any attention to it. The building was often lively, with young people, guests, and music. But this time, the noise was followed by silence, deafening and disturbing. The police later reconstructed the events. The man who entered the apartment attacked Breanna almost immediately. Signs of a struggle showed that she had fought back desperately. There were strands of torn hair on the floor, an overturned chair, and traces of blood leading from the living room to the hallway. The attacker acted with fury. The knife wounds were numerous and random. Experts said it was a flash of uncontrollable rage. Perhaps he came to talk, and the conversation turned into an argument. Perhaps he did not intend to kill until he felt he was losing control. But when it was over, only silence and blood remained in the apartment. Breanna's body was found later that day. Her mother, concerned that her daughter was not answering her calls, asked relatives to check the apartment. When they entered, the door was unlocked. The first thing that caught their eye was the scattered belongings and the strange silence. And then, Breanna's body on the floor, in the room where music had been playing just yesterday. The call to the police came in around 2 in the afternoon. Within minutes, the entire building was cordoned off. People came out onto the street to watch as ambulances and forensic investigators arrived. No one knew what to say. The investigators knew right away that this wasn't a robbery. Nothing valuable was missing. Her wallet and phone were on the table. So the motive was personal. Someone she knew came for her, not for her stuff. One of the officers later said, quote, "Roe. Since then, the countdown has begun. The search for the person who took the life of a girl who never hurt anyone. By evening, friends, neighbors, and acquaintances had gathered at her house. People couldn't believe it. It seemed as if the whole town had been orphaned. Candles stood on the driveway. Someone had placed her photo there, smiling, in a blue dress, at the school prom. Breanna's mother sat in her car nearby, unable to get out. She looked at the windows of the apartment where the lights had been on just a moment ago and whispered, "She just opened the door. She just opened the door." Many people repeated these words later, because they capture the essence of what happened. A girl who trusted people let someone into her home who brought death.
That announcement came today during a hearing for Joseph Tejeda, who's accused of shooting Wood. As you may recall, she was reported missing in October of last year.
For the police, the case began with silence. There were no signs of forced entry, theft, or accident in Breanna's apartment. Everything pointed to the killer entering willingly, like a friend she trusted. This fact was the first and most disturbing detail. At the crime scene, forensic investigators found shoe prints, several traces of blood that did not belong to the victim, and a piece of fabric stuck in the door handle. In the sink, there were traces of water, as if someone had tried to wash something off their hands. It all looked like a failed attempt to hide the obvious. Investigators started with her closest circle: family, friends, boyfriend, colleagues. Breanna was dating a young man named Justin. Their relationship was complicated. They often quarreled, broke up, and then made up again. On the day of the murder, he claimed to have been at home, but his words needed to be verified. The first thing that alerted investigators was his behavior. Justin came to the interrogation, calm, without tears, speaking briefly and distantly. Investigators noted that there were inconsistencies in his stories. He claimed that he had called Breanna in the morning, but phone records showed that the call was made after her death. It later emerged that they had had an argument the night before the murder. Breanna wanted to break up. He wanted to get back together. Messages found on her phone included, "You can't just write me out of your life, and if you leave, I don't know what I'll do." These words sounded like a warning, but at the time, no one paid any attention to them. The police sent DNA samples found at the crime scene for analysis. A few days later, confirmation came. The blood on the door handle belonged to Justin. This was the first serious evidence linking him to the murder scene. When investigators came to his home with a search warrant, they found a jacket with traces of blood matching Breanna's DNA. In his car, they found a knife, carefully washed but with traces of the same particles. After that, the police had no doubt. The person closest to her was the one who had taken her life. The town learned of the arrest the next day. People were stunned. The guy they had seen with Breanna, who had participated in school events with her, turned out to be the killer. He didn't look like a monster. He was normal, smiling, polite, athletic. That's what was most frightening. For Breanna's parents, it was like dying all over again. They knew Justin, welcomed him into their home, believed he loved their daughter. Her father said, "He ate at our table. I looked him in the eye and thought she was safe." The investigation revealed the frightening simplicity of the crime. It was not a random act of rage. It was a flash of possessiveness. Justin could not accept that Breanna had decided to leave. He came to talk, but the conversation turned into murder. The police determined that he entered without breaking in. The door opened after a light knock. When she said it was over, he lost control. An argument broke out, followed by violence. It all happened in a matter of minutes. After the crime, he tried to create the illusion of a random attack. He washed the knife, partially removed the traces, and threw away his clothes. But, as often happens, he left behind small details that gave him away. The investigation report simply states, the motive was jealousy. But behind these words lie broken lives. When Justin was led out of the police station in handcuffs, the crowd was silent. There were no cries, only the bitter realization that the killer was not hiding somewhere in the darkness. He was among them, smiling, holding the hand of the woman he would later take the life of. For the police, this case was a reminder that evil does not always come from outside. It can live nearby, in a person who says, "I love you." After Justin Timerman's arrest, the investigation entered a decisive phase. The investigators understood that despite strong evidence, they had no confession, which meant that every detail had to be proven. The Breanna Schneller case required precision, because it involved not only emotions, but also the fate of a young man who denied his guilt until the very end. The interrogations lasted for hours. Justin remained calm, answering briefly and without unnecessary emotion. He said that on the day of the murder, he was at home and had not seen Breanna since the morning, but his voice trembled when investigators read out a printout of his calls and messages. His phone had recorded his location near the girl's apartment that morning. He could not explain why. Psychologists who were present during the interrogations noted characteristic behavior, an attempt to maintain control at any cost. He denied that he was jealous, but his own words in the correspondence said otherwise. Phrases like, "If you're not with me, you won't be with anyone," sounded like a sentence. The police collected nearly 150 pieces of physical evidence. Among them were a knife found in the trunk of his car, shoe prints identical to those in the apartment, and his DNA at the crime scene. All of this painted a picture where there were no coincidences. Soon the investigation reconstructed the exact chronology of events. In the morning, Justin came to Breanna's apartment. They talked for about 20 minutes, as evidenced by the fingerprints on the cup and the coffee residue on the table. The argument began suddenly, and according to investigators, he attacked in a fit of rage, striking her several times in quick succession. Then realizing what he had done, he tried to cover up the evidence, but there was not enough time. When the charges were read out in court, the room was packed. Breanna's parents, friends, and classmates sat in the front rows. On the other side sat Justin in a gray suit, his head bowed. He did not look at the girl's family. The prosecutor spoke calmly, but every word sounded like a blow. "This is not a crime of passion. This is a crime of possessiveness." He decided that he had the right to control her life. When he realized he was losing control, he killed her. The defense tried to convince the jury that someone else could have committed the crime, that the evidence had been collected improperly. But the forensic evidence was flawless. Breanna's DNA and Justin's fingerprints were on the knife. His boot prints were on the carpet. His blood was on the door handle. He never confessed, either during the investigation or in court. Only once when the prosecutor asked him a direct question. "Did you kill Breanna Schneller?" Did he look up and say, "I don't remember"? These words became the focal point of the trial, a symbol of his unwillingness to take responsibility. The trial lasted several weeks. Witnesses talked about what Breanna was like, how jealous he was of her, how he stalked her after they broke up. A girl who was friends with them cried on the stand, saying that the day before the murder, Breanna had said, "I'm afraid of him. He's changed." When the verdict was announced, guilty on all counts, there was weeping in the courtroom. Breanna's mother bowed her head, her father clenched his fists. Justin sat motionless, as if he didn't understand what had happened. The judge read the sentence, and he stared into space. Life imprisonment, no parole. After the hearing, the prosecutor told reporters, "This is not a victory. It's just the end of one chapter. We didn't bring back her life, but we brought back justice." Breanna's friends gathered at her house that evening. They lit candles, read poems, and remembered how she laughed. No one talked about Justin. They only talked about her. For Wosau, this case became a symbol of betrayal within trust. The girl did not die at the hands of a stranger, but at the hands of someone she once loved. Investigators later admitted that the Breanna Schneller case was one of the most difficult cases of their careers. Because behind all the evidence, photographs, and reports lay one simple, unbearable truth. She had simply opened the door to someone she trusted. To understand why Breanna Schneller died, investigators had to figure out who was the person closest to her. Justin Timmerman was 18 years old, almost her age. Smiling, athletic, from an ordinary family. On the surface, he seemed like the perfect guy. In school photos, they stand side by side. He has his arm around her shoulders. She is laughing. Looking at these pictures, no one could have imagined that he would one day take her life. Their relationship began in school. They were a young couple with mutual friends and shared plans. At first, everything seemed simple and beautiful. Movies, walks, evening phone calls. But over time, according to those close to them, he began to show signs of possessive jealousy. He checked her messages and asked where she was and who she was with. Her friend recalled, he didn't yell, he just always wanted to know everything. And if she didn't answer, he would become gloomy. When Breanna decided she wanted to break up, he took it as a betrayal. For her, it was a natural step. They had grown up and gone their separate ways. For him, it was a disaster. He didn't know how to let go. In messages found on his phone, he wrote, "You can't leave. We have to be together. Without you, I'm nothing." Psychologists who studied the case described Justin as a person with a dependent personality type. For him, the relationship was not a partnership, but a way of asserting himself. Losing control was perceived as a threat to his very existence. When Breanna began to distance herself, he felt not sadness, but rage. One of the experts later said, he didn't hate her, he hated losing power over her. At school, Justin was quiet but quick-tempered. Several times, teachers noticed him losing his temper over minor issues. He had no criminal record, but there was a sense of inner instability, as if there was energy inside him that had no outlet. After the murder, an examination revealed signs of borderline personality disorder, a combination of impulsivity, anxiety, and a need to control those around him. The investigation established that he had been following Breanna for a week before the crime. His car was seen parked outside her house, and he called her several times during the night. He told his friends that she had betrayed him. These words sounded like an excuse even before the worst happened. When he came to her on the morning of May 2nd, he may not have planned to kill her. Perhaps he wanted to talk, to convince her to come back. But the conversation escalated into a conflict, and he lost control again. His anger was instantaneous and destructive. Several knife wounds, then shock, fear, an attempt to hide what he had done. He didn't run far, he didn't plan his escape. He just left, leaving chaos behind him. During interrogations, psychologists noted a strange mixture of indifference and self-pity. He said, "I don't remember what I did," but never once asked how Breanna died. He didn't cry, he didn't apologize. Only once, before the last hearing, did he say to the investigator, "I wanted her to hear me." This phrase became the key to understanding his motive. He didn't come to kill, he came to prove that his pain was more important than her right to freedom. Prosecutors called this crime anger of rejection. This is a state in which a person perceives the departure of a loved one as humiliation and responds with violence. Such murders are always personal, always filled with emotion. Not for profit, not for revenge, for the sake of retaining power, at least for a moment. At the trial, Breanna's mother said, he wanted her to belong only to him, but now she belongs only to heaven. After the verdict, psychologists noted, Timmerman is not a monster in the usual sense. He was not a cold-blooded killer. He was broken, dependent, unable to accept rejection. And that is the terrible truth, because there are too many people like him. People who confuse love with possession, care with control, pain with the right to destroy others. The motive for Breanna's murder could not be summed up in the words jealousy or quarrel. It was the despair of a man who could not live without the person he had made the center of his universe. And when that universe collapsed, he decided that she should disappear with it. The trial of Breanna Schneller ended a year after her death. The sentence was life imprisonment without the right to parole. When the judge pronounced these words, no one in the courtroom applauded. The girl's mother covered her face with her hands. Her father nodded quietly. All they wanted was for the truth to be told. Justin stood motionless. He did not turn around, did not say a word. He only glanced briefly in the direction where Breanna's family was sitting and lowered his head again. The judge said, "You didn't kill out of hatred. You killed because you couldn't accept that a person has the right to leave." After the trial, the town took a long time to recover. A photo of Breanna was hung on the wall of the school where she studied, with the caption, quote, "Der were." Every year, on the anniversary of her death, students, teachers, and parents place candles outside the school, not out of grief, but in memory. Breanna's story became a warning. Love without respect turns into destruction. She trusted, she opened the door, and behind it stood a man who did not understand that love is not the right to possess, but the ability to let go. Now her name is mentioned at school meetings, in conversations with psychologists, in campaigns against violence, because her story is not just a crime, but a cry that silence kills. Every evening, her mother lights a candle by the window. She says it is a light for her daughter, who left too soon but left a mark on the world, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the price of true freedom.